Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Planetarium show. My name is Jessica. I'm the director of the Planetarium, and with me tonight is one of our students, a familiar face here, but I will still let them say hi and introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Braden. I am a vocal music education major here at UMD.
It's still so cool, to hear that. I mean, I've
A
known
bit
you
of
for like 2
diversity.
years now, but
I know, right? Nah, I had diversity.
and some really cool stuff that
Yeah.
your work said, but we're not gonna jump
No.
too off topic already. Um, so, welcome back. Tonight is our monthly constellation show where we will take you through the night sky, show you the stars and constellations that you can find out, and tell you some of the stories behind them as well. Now, let me get all set up. As I'm doing that, as with any of our shows, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. Brayden is going to keep an eye on that for me and will let me know if questions come up. Do keep in mind there's a little bit of a delay between, when you see things and when we say them. So we may not get to all the questions right away, but we'll make sure to answer them at the end. All right. Well, if you're new to our constellation shows, we use this really awesome program called Stellarium, which is really just a planetarium for your computer. Right? You put in your date, time, and location, and it shows you the night sky. So I have it set up for right now for Duluth, Minnesota, since that is where we're located. We are still in the winter, so sun has already set. It's set a couple hours ago. So we've got a good dark sky already. Now, for anyone watching who is not in Duluth, as long as you're in the northern hemisphere, the sky is still going to look pretty similar to what you're seeing here. You should still be able to see mostly the same stuff. If you're close to the equator or in the southern hemisphere, things will be different. But if you want to see exactly how your sky looks, you can always download Stellarium for yourself. It is completely free. There's a link in the video description, and that is my monthly plug for Stellarium because it's an amazing tool. But let's get started with some of our February constellations. But as we do with most of our constellation shows, we're starting here in the north. And we like to start in the north because for most locations, these stars and constellations that we're going to show you here in the north are always up all year round. That makes them a really good kind of starting or anchor point to figure out where you're looking, and then from there you can start finding other things in the night sky. So the first thing to try and look for in the north is the 7 bright stars right here, which make up what's commonly known as the Big Dipper. And so we have the 4 stars that are the kind of cup of the Dipper, and then the 3 stars that are the handle of the Dipper. Now, the Big Dipper itself is actually not a constellation, it's an asterism. So that means it is a smaller grouping of stars within a larger constellation that's usually more recognizable. So in this case, the Big Dipper is the 7 brightest stars in the Greek constellation of Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. So to see the entire bear, we're going to have to add in some other stars. So we're going to start at the handle of the Dipper. This is actually the tail of the bear. And we're going to go right up its back to its ears, nose, chest, front legs, belly, and back legs. And of course, the great thing with this program is I can click and it'll draw it out on the sky for us. So again, we have the tail, back, ear, nose, chest, front legs, belly, and back legs. And that is our big bear. This time of year, our bear is kind of balancing or dancing on its tail. Now, if you might know, since we have a Big Dipper and a Big Bear, that's because we also have a Little Dipper and a Little Bear. Now, the Big Dipper is actually going to help us find that. So, you find your Big Dipper, and then you go to the front 2 stars in the cup of the Dipper. These are known as the pointer stars. because if you connect them in a line, they point you over to this star. Now, this star is named Polaris, but you might know it as the North Star. Now, it's a common misconception that the North Star is important because some people think that it must be the brightest star in the sky, and that's what makes it important. But that's actually not the case. The brightest star is another one, which I'll show you a little bit later. But what makes Polaris so special is the fact that it's the only star in our sky that doesn't move. And so what I'm going to do is fast forward time here a little bit. And as we do, we see all of the stars moving across the sky except for Polaris. Now, all of the stars are moving across the sky because the Earth is rotating. But Earth's North Pole is pointed right at Polaris. So everything looks like it's rotating around Polaris. That means it's always in the same spot, which means it's always in the direction of north, and that's what made it important. It was an important tool for navigation, because once you knew north, you knew your other directions. All right, I'm just gonna reset the time back to right now. But our star Polaris here is the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. And so we have the handle and the cup. Again, there are 7 stars in the Little Dipper, just like the Big Dipper. We have 3 stars in the handle and 4 stars in the cup. Now, if you're struggling to see all of the stars in the Little Dipper, that is perfectly normal. Most people will see Polaris and the front 2 stars in the cup. The other 4 stars in the middle are incredibly faint, which make them very hard to see unless you have super dark skies and really well dark adapted eyes. So our Little Dipper is also the Greek constellation of Ursa Minor, the Little Bear. Unlike the Big Bear, we don't have any additional stars. This is the entire constellation. Again, the handle is the tail of the bear, but then the cup is the entire body. So we usually picture like back legs, body, front legs, and then a head right about here. And so those are our 2 Greek bears in the sky. Now, if you've ever seen a bear, these might look like a little funny. Because, as you probably know, bears don't have long tails like this. They typically have short, little stubby tails. But there is a reason for these bears to have such long tails, and it comes down to the story of these constellations. So it starts off with Zeus, who's the king of the Greek gods. He has a really bad habit of going down to Earth and making new friends with women on Earth. One time he meets a woman named Callisto. They become super great friends, so much so that they ended up having a son together named Arcus. Now, if you know Greek mythology, you know that Zeus was married to the goddess Hera, and when she found out about Callisto, she was understandably not happy. So she turned Callisto into a bear to punish Zeus. Now, over the years, Arcus grew up, and as many kids do, became interested in kind of hiking through the woods, going hunting and fishing. And so he's out exploring the woods one day when he comes across this giant bear. And he's terrified because he doesn't know that bear is his mom. Well, thankfully, before anything bad happens, Zeus had come back down to Earth to check on Callisto, because he did that every now and then. And so he kind of explained to Arcus, hey, this is actually your mom, here's what happened, and feeling a little guilty about this whole situation, Zeus decided to turn Arcus into a bear as well, and then places both of the bears up into the night sky so that they can live together forever. As bears, but at least they'll be together and safe. So in order to get them up into the night sky, he picked them up by their stubby little bear tails, spun them around, and flung them up into the sky. And it's that process of being spun and flung by their tails that stretched out those tails. And so we have our big bear here is the mama Callisto, and the little bear is her son Arcus. And that is why the bears are in the sky and why they have such long tails. All right. So there are a few more constellations that I want to point out here in the north. If we go back to the Big Dipper, back to these pointer stars, instead of going all the way to Polaris, we're actually going to stop at the very first star we come across. This is the tail of Draco the Dragon. And to follow Draco, we're going to follow his long, winding body up and around and down, or hold on. Yeah, down until we get to his eyes. His mouth is kind of hidden by the tree right now, and he's kind of breathing fire down on the horizon. And so here we have Draco the Dragon. Now, Draco is part of the Hercules story. Now, Hercules is generally up in the spring and summer, a little bit in the fall as well. But he is a part of one of the 12 labors that Hercules had to go through. Draco was guarding a tree with golden apples that Hercules had to pick the fruit from. And so he is up here as part of Hercules' story. All right, one last constellation here in the north. We are yet again going to go back to our pointer stars. And this time we're going to follow them past Draco's tail, past Polaris, and we're kind of curving just a little bit until we get to this big, what we typically call W in the sky, but this time of year it looks more like an M. And this is the Greek constellation of Cassiopeia the Queen. Now, I understand turning a W or an M into a queen does take a little bit of imagination. We tend to picture her as if she's sitting in her throne and we're getting kind of a profile view. So you have like her head here, her back, upper legs, lower legs, and big long clown feet. So she's upside down right now. You'll notice in this program they draw her a little bit differently. That is completely normal. There are many different ways to draw out these constellations because for a lot of them, we're left to really try and interpret how they're supposed to look. So yeah, lots of ways that you can do it. So if you end up seeing constellation art that doesn't look like what you've seen before, that's why. Lots of artistic license there. All right, so that concludes what we're going to show right now for our northern sky. And hopefully you kind of understand why I started here, especially started with the Big Dipper. Because once you find the Big Dipper, you have 3 other constellations in the north that you can look for and find. All right, well now I'm going to take us over to the southeast. First up, you will see we have Mars hanging out over in the southeast right now. And over in the southwest, we have Jupiter getting low on the horizon. Just now setting is Venus. Uranus is also up, but that is not one that you can see with your naked eye. You do have to have a pair of binoculars or a telescope to be able to see it. But what I wanted to show you over in the southeast is what's known as the winter hexagon. It is a set of 6 constellations that are very bright and easy to find in the winter sky, hence winter hexagon. Now we're going to get started with the most famous and probably most recognizable of the 6 constellations. I'm going to zoom on in on them real quick. But that is this constellation here. This is, of course, Orion the Hunter, one of my personal favorites. And I think it's because he's the first constellation that I really was able to recognize and find myself. So he's a favorite of mine. So for Orion, typically the easiest way to know it's him, you have your 3 stars in a row that make up the belt, and then it's surrounded by 4 stars that make a rectangle around the belt. So we have the belt. Hanging off of his belt is his sword. These 2 stars are the shoulders. And these two stars at the bottom of the rectangle are his knees. And then we have either a shield and a club, or a bow and some arrows. Again, a couple of different ways that you can interpret him. Now, the star that I just clicked on, I guess looking at him, his left shoulder, it's actually would be his right shoulder. But that top left star is named Betelgeuse. Now, it's great name, especially if you're a fan of the film. And it can also be pronounced Betelgeuse, which I don't like as much, but it's actually Arabic. A lot of the brightest stars have Arabic names because after the Greeks had kind of come up with their constellations, Arab astronomers actually adopted their constellations, but then named the stars because the Greeks didn't really name the stars. And so the Arabic names are actually pretty representative of what the star is in the constellation. So, for example, Betelgeuse here, when you translate it, it means the armpit of the hunter, because that's where the star is. Now, you may notice it has a kind of orangish, reddish tint to it. That is real. Stars do come in a variety of colors. This one is red because it's what we call a red supergiant. So it's a star at the end of its life that is going to go supernova, which sounds terrifying, but we're perfectly safe. We're far enough away. It's not going to hurt us. But we are close enough that it's going to be so bright that we'll be able to see it up in our daytime sky. So I'm hoping it happens in my lifetime. It's supposed to happen soon, which in astronomical terms could be tomorrow, could be a couple thousand years from now. We just don't really know. We've never actively observed a star as it went supernova, so we don't quite know what to look for as far as signs that it's about to happen. We just know that it should be soon. The other thing in Orion that I want to point out is his belt. I'm sorry, not his belt, his sword. So hanging off of his belt, you have these 3 points that make up the sword. And if you look, that very middle one looks a little fuzzy. That's because that middle point of light is not a star. It's actually a nebula. A nebula is a giant cloud of gas and dust in space. Now, you can actually see this with your unaided eye. You don't have to have a telescope. It will look just like this, a little tiny fuzzy blob. But if you do have a telescope and you're able to zoom on into it, look at it, you'll see a lot more detail in the structure of this nebula. It's one of my favorite winter telescope objects because it's one of the few nebulae that I think actually look really impressive in a telescope. Most looks just like faint gray fuzzy blobs. This one looks a little bit better, so I quite like it. All right, so Orion, as I said, is part of the winter hexagon. Our next two constellations are his hunting dogs. So to find the first one, we're actually going to take Orion's belt and we're going to follow it down until we get to the super bright star here. Now this is the star Sirius, and it is the brightest star in the night sky. Sirius is part of Canis Major, the big dog. That's why it's often called the dog star. And for any Harry Potter fans, J.K. Rowling actually got a lot of her inspiration from the night sky, so that's why Sirius Black is an animagus who turns into a dog. It's also why the Sirius XM radio station, or radio company, their logo is a dog. So there are a couple of different ways that you can picture the dog. I picture it as if Sirius is the eye, and then so we have the ears, here's the mouth, he's kind of barking, and then his body and legs come down this way. The way this program draws it is as if Sirius is his collar, like a jewel on his collar. So this would be his head, and this would be his body and legs. So I can show you how they draw it. Again, slightly different interpretations. I just like the little pointy-eared yappy puppy, so that's what I like to draw. But yeah, that is our big dog. Now, speaking of artistic license, let's go find the little dog, Canis Minor. So what we're going to do is we're going to star hop from Cirrus up and to the left until we get to our next bright star. This is Procyon, and it is the brightest star in Canis Minor, the little dog. And I'm just going to draw this one out for you guys. All right, so we start here, and we go here. That's it. It's a line. I guess you could call it a wiener dog, but yeah, lots of imagination needed to turn a line into a dog. But there you go. There's our big dog and our little dog. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out for just a minute, reposition us so we can find our next constellation in the winter hexagon. Just like we found the big dog, we're going to start off at Orion and his belt, but this time we're going to follow it up until we get to a bright star. This bright star here is Aldebaran, and it is the angry red eye of Taurus the bull. So these two stars at the front of the V here are his two eyes. The rest of the V is his snout. Then we have his horns go up this way, and his body stretches out this way. And so there we have Taurus the bull. This is one of the reasons I kind of like picturing Orion with a shield, because it looks like Taurus is kind of charging at him. So, you know, I think he would have a shield up to try and defend himself, but that's, again, how I view it in my head. Now, if you were to keep following Orion's belt past this V of stars that makes the head and snout of Taurus, on into his body, you would reach this little grouping of stars here. This is sometimes mistakenly thought to be the Little Dipper because it's tiny and kind of dipperish in shape, but it's not. This is the Pleiades star cluster. So the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters, is what we call an open cluster. So it's a group of tens to hundreds of stars. I forget exactly how many are in this particular one, but it tends to be a fairly young group of stars. Now, from our position here on Earth, without a telescope, you can see 6 to 7 bright stars. It depends on your location and how good your eyes are, whether you'll see 6 or 7. But that's why that number 6 and 7 tends to be repeatedly found in different cultures' interpretations of what this star cluster is. So the Greeks, as I said, saw it as the Seven Sisters. In some places, it is a grouping of 6 wives that escaped into the sky after their husbands kind of snubbed them. So lots of different interpretations like that. One of my favorite things, though, is the Japanese name for this star cluster is Subaru, which might sound familiar. And that's why the Subaru car company's logo is a group of stars. It's the Pleiades star cluster. All right. We have 2 constellations left to find in our winter hexagon. So what we're going to do, starting off here at Taurus, we're going to kind of follow his horns up until we get to this squished pentagon. So this is Auriga the charioteer. So it's a man riding in a chariot. The man's name is Auriga. This, again, takes a little bit of imagination, a couple of different ways that you can picture it. The way I do is here we have one of the wheels, then we have the other wheel. This makes up the basket of the chariot that you would ride in, and then this would be Auriga's head poking out over the top. But there are different ways of picturing it. I know some people picture that this is Auriga, and we're getting kind of a side view of like a standing chariot. So like this would be the front, and then the wheels would be down here, and he'd be kind of standing in it. So again, different ways of seeing it. But that is Auriga, the charioteer. And lastly, if we follow this fuzzy line, this fuzzy band that you're seeing in the sky is our Milky Way galaxy. It's the hundreds of billions of stars that make up our galaxy. Most of them are too far away for us to see as nice little pinpoints of light. So all of that light blends together into this fuzzy haze. And it's shaped like this. We see just a strip because our galaxy is a flat disk. And so we're looking into the disk, seeing all of those stars concentrated there. So if we start at Auriga and we follow the Milky Way down, before we get to our little dog, we'll find our next group of stars. And this is the Gemini twins of Castor and Pollux. Castor has a long body and short little legs, and Pollux here has a short body and long legs. And they're kind of arm in arm as they're walking along the Milky Way. Now, the Gemini twins, they have lots of different stories, and usually the stories involve them getting into some sort of mischief. My favorite is the time that the twins decided to crash a wedding and pull the best prank ever. They kidnapped the bride. So you can picture, instead of them being arm in arm, that this is actually the bride that they're carrying as they run away. And there you have it. That is our winter hexagon. We have again Orion the hunter, Taurus the bull, Auriga the charioteer, the Gemini twins, the little dog, and the big dog. Now, one of my personal favorite things in Stellarium's view of the sky has to do again with the little dog. In this region, there is another constellation. It's mono. I don't remember how to say it. It's a unicorn. As you can see, I don't know this one very well. It's pretty faint and hard to see. It's not one that I've really had a lot of practice with, but you can kind of just click and it'll show it, right? And so it looks like our little dog is riding on the unicorn into battle, and I love it, and that's how I picture the night sky always now. The little dog has his own little warrior unicorn that he's riding on. It's so cute. All right, well, I think that is going to bring us to the end of our February star show. Lots of great things to see up. And of course, next month we will start getting into some of the spring constellations because, yeah, spring is on its way. We actually had a really nice warm day today. It was very pleasant here in Duluth. But all right, let me switch us back over. And let's see, did we have any questions?
No questions, more just comments. So we had yeah, it was two comments of like there's a jazz standards. One's called like the Pleiades, and one's called Carla Vagan,
Nice.
and it
Oh yeah,
yeah
yeah,
yeah
the wagon. You also see that in the Nordic sky, um,
yeah.
which makes sense because Sweden is up in that region. Yeah, it is. My geography is failing me right now.
Right.
But you do see in the Norse constellations, the Big Dipper is the man's wagon, which is usually associated with either Thor or Odin, and the Little Dipper is the woman's wagon, which is usually associated with Freya. So seeing the dippers as wagons is another pretty common one.
Yeah, and then we just got a notification about a Jimmy Buffett song with Pleiades.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. The Pleiades, I forgot to say this when I had it up, but the Pleiades is incredibly bright. Like you can even see it like in decently light polluted skies. Like I
Yeah.
know I've had people tell me they could see it from like in the in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis and
Yeah.
St. Paul. So it's a really great one to try and see, but because it's so bright, that means it's incredibly noticeable. So a lot of the cultures, when they were, enjoying the night sky, that's one of the things that stuck in their attention for whatever culture you talk about around the world that could see the Pleiades. So you see it in almost every culture. Um, I can't say every because I don't know every single one, but almost every culture has some sort of story or mythology around the Pleiades. Yeah. Plus, it looks like a little micro dipper. And who doesn't love
It
that?
does look like a teeny dipper.
Ooh, cool. Lots of song recommendations
Yeah.
in chat today. I'm excited to go listen to those. All right. Well, let's just take a few more minutes. Let's see if there are any other questions that you may have. In the meantime, let me tell you all what's coming up this week. So, for our in person shows at the Planetarium, Friday is going to be Adventure to the Edge of the Universe. Saturday afternoon is our family show in my backyard. This one is particularly great for younger kids or families with younger kids. And then Saturday evening is Seeing a Photon's Journey Across Space, Time, and Mind. And then, of course, you can join us back here next week, next Wednesday, for our Ask an Astronomer show, which is another one we do monthly. So we'll be here just answering all your questions.
Yep.
And let's see. I don't think I have it. I forgot to load it into my promos, but for those in the area that missed the announcement last week, we do finally have a date set for Astronomy Day this year. It is going to be Saturday, April 1st from 6 to 9 p.m. We're still getting all of the details ironed out, so we'll have lots more information coming out in the coming weeks. But you can go ahead and mark your calendar, Astronomy Day, April 1st from 6 to 9 p.m. Very excited. We've got some really fun things that I think if we can get them all worked out, we've got some really fun things in the works. So
It'll be a good day. It'll be
yeah.
really fun.
All right. Well, I am not seeing any questions,
Neither am I.
so I think we will wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We hope you had fun learning a little bit about the constellations and stars in our night sky. Um, Again, we have in-person shows happening on Fridays and Saturdays. We are still streaming regularly on Wednesdays here. So hopefully we will see you in the future at another show. But until then, have a wonderful week and we'll see you next time. So, bye, everyone.
Bye bye.